Hey Utah State fans, welcome to the second edition of the Front Row Network YouTube Opponent Preview. Once again, I am your host, Blake Hatfield of USU Junkies, and this week we dive right in to take a good look at the Falcons of the U.S. Air Force Academy. So Utah State is coming off of a tough Week 1 loss that came at the hands of the Utes of the Pac-12. It was a gritty game, tough battle, quite an effort on both sides, and Utah of the Pac-12 came out the victors. So Utah State does have some encouraging things to take away from that, though. I think anyone that understands football and that really watched the game and what was happening, there are definitely some exciting things moving forward for Utah State. That being said, we definitely will carry a bad taste in our mouths into Week 2. On the other hand, Air Force, they should be minty fresh after using and abusing Colgate. Colgate, tough on cavities, but soft on the triple option. So Air Force is an extremely disciplined football team. That being said, I did hear that they actually forgot to floss after brushing them aside. So they are human. The other thing we can take away from this game, which isn't much, they did face Colgate, but Colgate actually gave them a good run for their money in that first quarter and held a 7-0 lead going into the second quarter. It does appear as though the rules of engagement for Air Force were only once fired upon. Air Force did unfortunately suffer a loss. Starting quarterback Cale Pearson did go down with a knee injury in the second quarter. However, a weenie came in, rose to the challenge, and pulled out the victory. He managed the game very well, and that triple option was on fire. Hard to really see what we can take away from that. Colgate wasn't very sound in their tackling. They kept trying to knock over very capable running backs rather than wrapping them up. That is one thing about Air Force that's a little bit strange. They call themselves the Falcons of the Air Force Academy. However, they display no air attack on the field. It appears as though the only aerial training that they do is away from the gridiron. Air Force has a unique scenario. This game is played in Colorado, but it's always fun to see them when they travel on the road because they always rely on Navy to carry them to every one of their battles. This is only the second meeting between Utah State and Air Force, the first one dating clear back to 1969. So we don't know a ton about them at a personal level. We do know, a lot of you will remember, our own Chucky Keaton was actually originally an Air Force verbal commit. He liked what he saw there. I'm sure they have a tremendous atmosphere with the cadets there in that stadium. However, it only took one game for Chucky Keaton to visit Romney Stadium and want to come play for the Utah State Aggies. I think a lot of you remember the one game that happened in was when BYU came into town and we absolutely throttled them on our home field. Keaton loved the atmosphere. So I thought, since we're not that familiar with Air Force, sometimes it's a good idea to contrast something you're not familiar with something that you are. I'll go ahead and return the favor to BYU and contrast them against Air Force. Please understand, Air Force, this is in no disrespect for you, no offense to this. It's a contrast. I promise it's going to make you look very good. To get into Air Force, candidates are judged on their academic achievement, demonstrated leadership, athletics, and character. They even have to secure a nomination, generally from Congress. BYU, on the other hand, it's once you get into the school, you then become mercilessly judged by your peers in an intense game of holier than thou. Air Force actually has an honor code, and theirs states, "We will not lie, steal, cheat, nor tolerate among us anyone who does." BYU, on the other hand, is much more concerned with haircuts, facial hair, and sandals. Air Force is an extremely disciplined program. They run the triple option very well. They can give defense fits. On the defensive side of the ball, they are just as disciplined. They know their assignments. They execute, and they give teams all that they can handle. So obviously they run the ball very well. Their leading rusher last week was John Lee, Interesting about him, it's widely believed that he's actually the brother of Ken Lee, who you obviously will all know as the inspiration to this very heartfelt Bulgarian Idol audition. So fans, this should be an interesting matchup. I did go ahead and sim this game in NCAA Football 14 yet again. Same settings. I went ahead and left Kel Pearson and Connor Williams in the game. At the time that I simmed it, I had no idea, I hadn't heard news. Went ahead and gave them both the benefit of the doubt. But it was a good game. I almost wish I would have watched it instead of simmed it. It was 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. Going into the half, Utah State had taken a 14-10 lead. Going into the fourth quarter, Utah State had jumped out a little bit and led 28-10, and then held on to win comfortably 35-10. Now, take this for what it's worth. It was a video game simulation, and Kel Pearson was in there rather than a weenie. It's unclear as to how it would have shaken out had a weenie been behind center. So we can take it for whatever it's worth, but Chucky Keaton was the offensive player of the game, much to the dismay of the fake Cadet Air Force fans in the video game stands. He amassed 351 pass yards and 3 touchdowns and added 50 yards rushing. Defensive player of the game was Zach Vigil, coming up with 7 tackles. My own prediction on this game, I think it's going to be a tremendous matchup. It's going to be a very fun game to watch. It will be the epitome of strength versus strength. Air Force runs that triple option very well. It's a little bit unfortunate that we catch them early on in the season when traditionally they are very strong instead of later in the season where they traditionally become weaker and weaker as they go. But they do have that rushing attack that should be on point. However, Utah State's rushing defense should be on point, which is a very strong defense as well. So you have 2 tremendous strengths colliding in one awesome football game. My prediction in this one is Utah State 31-17. So Aggie fans, enjoy this game. I've heard of a few people who are traveling out to go see. I've also heard that tickets are relatively cheap. So if you're still on the fence and you have the means to get out there, go ahead and buy yourself a ticket, go support your Aggies. If you're staying home, find a screen that's tuned into CBS Sports, cheer loud, and enjoy this one. In parting, Aggie fans, I do just want to say, Ken Lee, leave without you.